I never imagined that a simple job interview could turn into the most transformative experience of my life. Honestly, when I walked into that office, my mind was completely on landing the promotion I had been chasing for months. I had been working for the company for years, quietly ambitious, always the reliable guy in the background, the one everyone counted on but rarely noticed. And then, out of nowhere, my boss called me into his office with that peculiar look in his eyes, a mixture of mischief and seriousness. "Listen," he said, leaning back in his chair, fingers steepled, "we need a new face in the marketing department. Someone dynamic, someone unique, and I think we're ready for a female employee." I blinked. I wasn't sure if I had heard him correctly. A female employee? Here? In my department? I laughed nervously, assuming he was joking. "No, seriously," he continued, glancing around like he expected someone else to be eavesdropping. "We need a fresh perspective, and frankly, we're struggling to fill this role. But here's the thing, I know you've got the creativity, the charisma, and, well, there's something about you. You could pull this off." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. My heart was pounding, not just from the shock, but from a strange, thrilling curiosity. Could he possibly mean me? But how? I had never even considered this side of myself. I mean, sure, I sometimes tried on women's clothing at home when I was alone, experimenting quietly, laughing at myself, but it was a secret I had buried deep, convinced the world would never accept it. And now, here it was, my boss, in all seriousness, suggesting I step into that role. "You're saying, you want me to be the female employee?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," he said, a subtle grin tugging at his lips. "I'm saying you could bring something no one else can. Think of it as stepping into a new role, in every sense of the word." My pulse raced. I felt a cocktail of fear and excitement, but more than anything, a strange, undeniable pull toward something I couldn't yet name. I nodded slowly, more to myself than to him, because part of me already knew the answer. Part of me had always known this moment would come, the moment I would step into a version of myself I had kept hidden. "All right," I said finally, trying to sound confident, "I'll do it." The next few days were a whirlwind. I spent hours researching how to present myself, what clothing would fit the office environment yet transform me convincingly, and how to walk, speak, and carry myself in ways that felt authentic but entirely new. I went through countless outfits, trying to find the balance between professional and feminine, until I settled on a simple yet elegant blouse and skirt that made me feel alive. And when I first applied makeup, my reflection stopped me in my tracks. I barely recognized myself, but it was me, an entirely different me, yet still mine. The morning I stepped into the office as the new female employee, I could barely breathe. My hands shook as I adjusted my blazer and smoothed my hair. Every step toward the elevator felt monumental. And when I walked into the open office space, the hum of computers and muted chatter seemed to fade. Eyes turned. There was a pause, a collective intake of breath, and then, curiosity. "Wow," someone whispered. "You look amazing." I smiled, a nervous but genuine smile, and suddenly felt a strange surge of confidence. I wasn't just playing a role. I was stepping into an identity I had longed to explore but had never dared. And the reactions, while initially tinged with surprise, were warm, encouraging, and genuinely intrigued. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, I found myself more at ease, more attuned to this version of me. I discovered nuances I had never realized, the sway of my walk, the way my voice could soften without losing authority, the confidence that came from embracing authenticity, even if it scared me. My boss watched it all, a quiet pride in his eyes, and sometimes, late in the day, he'd say, "You're exceeding every expectation. I knew you could do it." But it wasn't just about the office. It was about me finally feeling whole, seen, and capable of expressing a side of myself I had hidden for so long. There were moments of doubt, of course. Glances that felt judgmental, whispers that made my chest tighten, but I learned to breathe through them, to remember why I had chosen this path. Every time I conquered a fear, I felt a spark of exhilaration, a thrill that coursed through my veins. One particular day, everything shifted. We had a client presentation, and I was leading the discussion, presenting ideas I had poured my heart into. As I spoke, I noticed a colleague, someone who had always been dismissive of my contributions, watching intently, nodding along, clearly impressed. And in that moment, I realized something profound. The transformation wasn't just outward. It was internal. The courage, the pride, the joy I felt, it was all real. I wasn't pretending anymore. I was living. By the end of that week, the office had fully embraced me, not just as the new employee, but as someone who brought vitality, creativity, and a fresh perspective to the team. My relationships with colleagues deepened. They asked questions, sought advice, and confided in me in ways they hadn't before. I had become indispensable, not despite my transformation, but because of it. And then came the most unexpected twist. My boss called me into his office again, the same mischievous glint in his eyes. "I have to admit," he said, leaning forward, "I wasn't sure how this would go. But you've completely exceeded my expectations. You've changed the department, the office, even me. I didn't know what we were missing until you stepped in." I felt my chest swell with pride, gratitude, and something else, something I had never anticipated: love. Not the romantic kind, not yet, but a deep, profound affection for someone who had believed in me when I hadn't fully believed in myself. As I left his office, I paused in the hallway, touching the smooth fabric of my blouse, feeling the subtle sway of my skirt, and I smiled to myself. This was no longer just an experiment, no longer just a role I had been asked to play. This was me. Every step, every glance in the mirror, every nervous heartbeat, it had led me here. Weeks turned into months, and my confidence grew. I learned to navigate the delicate balance of identity and presentation, to embrace the parts of myself that had once felt forbidden. I discovered joy in the little things, choosing accessories, experimenting with hairstyles, the thrill of a perfectly coordinated outfit. But more importantly, I discovered a sense of self I had never known, a courage to be seen, fully and unapologetically. And there were moments, quiet and private, when I allowed myself to reflect on the journey. I remembered the fear, the hesitation, the nights I had spent alone, practicing smiles, perfecting walks, imagining reactions. And I realized how far I had come, not because anyone forced me, but because I dared to step into the unknown, to embrace a truth I had long denied. The most transformative moments, I realized, weren't about clothes, makeup, or appearances. They were about courage, authenticity, and acceptance. Every challenge I faced, every doubt I overcame, strengthened me, reshaped me, and allowed me to step into a life that felt more real than anything I had known before. One evening, as I stayed late finishing a project, my boss approached me quietly. "You know," he said softly, "this department is thriving because of you. But I think the biggest change has been in you. I can see it in the way you carry yourself, the way you connect with people. You've become unstoppable." I smiled, feeling a lump in my throat. I didn't need words to explain how profound this journey had been. The mirror now reflected not just a new image, but a new person, someone brave, confident, and wholly alive. As I walked home that night, the city lights glinting off the wet pavement, I felt a sense of serenity I had never known. The journey wasn't over, it would never truly be over, but I had taken the first step into a life of authenticity, and it was exhilarating, terrifying, and beautiful all at once. I thought back to that moment in my boss's office, the nervous laugh, the hesitant agreement. I had no idea then how transformative this decision would be. And yet, here I was, fully myself, accepted, admired, and more alive than I had ever been. Every step in these shoes, every new experience, every glance and smile, it all reminded me of one essential truth: courage changes everything. Embracing who you truly are, even when the world expects something else, is the bravest act of all. And as I stepped into the elevator that night, my reflection catching the faint light, I whispered to myself, almost in disbelief, "This is me. All of me. And I've never felt more alive." From that day forward, the office became a stage not for pretending, but for living authentically. Each morning brought new challenges, new opportunities, and new joys. I learned to love the way I moved, the way I spoke, and the way I connected with others. I became not just the female employee my boss had envisioned, but a person who had finally embraced her own potential and identity. And the most beautiful part? No one ever asked me to stop being myself. Instead, they celebrated it, learned from it, and, in turn, inspired me to continue growing, exploring, and thriving. The weeks that followed were a revelation. Every day I showed up in the office, I felt more alive than the day before, but I also felt the weight of responsibility. This role wasn't just about wearing a skirt or a blouse, it was about proving to myself that I could fully inhabit a part of me I had long denied. And the most surprising thing? I was beginning to enjoy it. Truly enjoy it. There was a rhythm to this life, a subtle but powerful joy in simply existing in a way that felt authentic. There were moments of tension, of course. Some colleagues were curious, others skeptical. I could feel their glances, the whispers that might have stung at first. But over time, those glances transformed into smiles, those whispers into questions, and eventually into admiration. I remember one particular afternoon when a coworker, someone I had never spoken to much, stopped by my desk. "You've really changed the energy around here," she said softly, almost shyly. "It's refreshing. Inspiring, even." I looked up, unsure how to respond. Inspiring? Me? I had spent so long hiding that part of myself, I wasn't used to anyone seeing it as strength. "Thank you," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "That means a lot." And as the weeks passed, I began noticing subtle shifts in myself. My movements became more fluid, my posture more confident. Even my voice, when I spoke in meetings or presentations, carried a tone I hadn't dared to explore before, a balance of softness and authority. It was as if embracing this side of myself had unlocked an entirely new dimension of my personality, one that had always existed but had been dormant, waiting for a chance to emerge. One evening, as I left the office late, I paused at the entrance, looking out at the city skyline glittering against the night sky. My reflection in the glass caught my attention. For the first time, I didn't just see a carefully constructed appearance. I saw me. Every detail, the way my hair framed my face, the subtle hint of makeup, the confidence in my stance, spoke of someone who had fought, hesitated, and finally claimed a part of herself. It wasn't easy. There were days when the doubt crept in, when I questioned whether this was truly me or just a performance. But every time, I reminded myself that this wasn't about pretending. It was about stepping into a fuller version of who I had always been, the side of myself I had long suppressed out of fear. And with every step I took, that fear slowly diminished, replaced by a thrilling sense of freedom. The transformation reached a new level when I was asked to lead a high-profile client pitch. My boss had full confidence in me, and I knew that this was my chance to show not just my colleagues, but myself, that I could thrive in this role. The night before the presentation, I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my blazer and smoothing my skirt. I experimented with a subtle twist of my hair, a touch of eyeliner, and even a faint shade of lipstick. Each detail felt like a brushstroke on a canvas, painting a version of me that was confident, poised, and fully alive. The next morning, walking into the conference room, my heart raced. I took a deep breath, reminded myself of every late night spent practicing, every moment of doubt I had conquered, and stepped forward. The presentation began. At first, the room was quiet, everyone listening intently. I felt the weight of their gaze, the collective curiosity. But as I spoke, something remarkable happened. The energy shifted. I wasn't just presenting ideas, I was connecting. Every point I made, every suggestion, every confident gesture, resonated. I saw nods, smiles, and even admiration in eyes that had once seemed indifferent. By the time I finished, the room erupted in applause. My colleagues were genuinely impressed, but what struck me most was the look on my boss's face. There was pride there, yes, but also something deeper, a recognition of the journey I had undertaken, the courage it had taken to arrive at this moment. After the presentation, he approached me quietly. "You did it," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Not just the pitch, you've done something bigger. You've transformed yourself, and in doing so, you've transformed this entire department." I couldn't be prouder. I felt tears welling up, not from embarrassment, but from a profound sense of validation. For the first time, I realized that this journey wasn't just about appearances or fulfilling a role. It was about embracing courage, authenticity, and the power of self-discovery. Yet, as thrilling as it was, the journey wasn't without its challenges. There were moments of vulnerability, moments when I questioned whether I could sustain this identity under the scrutiny of colleagues and clients. Some days, the weight of expectation pressed heavily on me, and I longed for the safety of anonymity. But each time, I reminded myself that fear was temporary, and authenticity was enduring. One evening, my boss called me into his office again. I could feel the tension in the air, the quiet anticipation. "There's something I've been meaning to ask," he began. "This role, it's changed everything for you, hasn't it?" I nodded, unsure if I wanted to put it into words. "Yes," I said finally. "It's changed everything about how I see myself. How I live. How I exist." He smiled knowingly. "I thought so. And that's exactly why I wanted to offer you something new. A leadership role, one that allows you to mentor, guide, and inspire others. Not just in marketing, but in embracing who they truly are." The weight of his words hit me like a wave. He wasn't just acknowledging my transformation, he was giving me the opportunity to help others find their own courage. My heart swelled with emotion, a mix of gratitude, excitement, and a newfound sense of purpose. The days that followed were filled with incredible growth. I mentored new employees, guided them through projects, and even shared, in small ways, my own journey. Each conversation, each smile of understanding, reinforced the truth I had come to embrace: authenticity is contagious. Courage inspires courage. One afternoon, while reviewing reports in my office, I received an unexpected message. It was from an old friend, someone who had known me before this transformation. Their message was simple: "I see you. Truly. And I'm proud of you." I paused, reading the words over and over. It was the affirmation I hadn't realized I craved, the external validation that reinforced what I had already discovered within myself. Tears streamed down my face, not from sadness, but from a profound sense of recognition. I had been hiding for so long, and now, I was finally seen not just by strangers, colleagues, or my boss, but by someone who mattered deeply to me. As the weeks turned into months, I began to notice the subtle shifts in my life outside the office as well. I carried myself differently on the streets, in cafes, even in casual conversations with friends. There was a newfound poise, a confidence that radiated naturally. I noticed that people treated me with respect, curiosity, and genuine interest. And more importantly, I treated myself with the same respect, curiosity, and interest I had long denied. The journey wasn't linear. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, and days when I longed for the comfort of hiding. But each challenge, each moment of hesitation, became an opportunity to strengthen my resolve. I learned to embrace discomfort, to walk through fear, and to stand tall in my authenticity. And then came the most unexpected moment of all. My boss, who had guided me through this journey with quiet wisdom and encouragement, called me into his office one last time. "I have one final request," he said, a subtle smile playing on his lips. "You've transformed yourself, inspired this team, and changed our department. But now, I want you to take it even further. Lead a workshop for the company, share your journey, your insights, and your courage. Show others what's possible when they embrace who they truly are." My heart raced. The thought of standing in front of the entire company, sharing such a personal story, was terrifying. But the thrill, the challenge, and the opportunity to inspire others outweighed the fear. I agreed, and over the following weeks, I prepared meticulously, crafting a narrative that was authentic, emotional, and deeply human. The day of the workshop arrived. Standing in front of the audience, I felt a wave of nerves, but also a surge of confidence. I shared my journey, the hesitation, the fear, the courage, and the joy. I spoke of transformation, identity, and the power of authenticity. I watched as colleagues leaned forward, listened intently, and even nodded in recognition. There were moments of laughter, moments of reflection, and moments when silence spoke louder than words. By the end of the session, the applause was overwhelming. But more than the applause, it was the recognition in their eyes, the understanding, the empathy, and the connection that left me profoundly moved. I realized then that my journey, once deeply personal and secret, had become a beacon of courage and authenticity for others. Walking home that night, the city lights reflecting off the pavement, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey had been long, challenging, and transformative. I had stepped into a role that initially terrified me, and in doing so, I had discovered the most authentic, courageous version of myself. Every step, every decision, every moment of vulnerability had led me to this place, a place of acceptance, pride, and joy. And as I paused to look at my reflection in a shop window, I whispered to myself, almost in disbelief, "This is who I am. Fully, unapologetically, me." From that day forward, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I had the courage, the authenticity, and the strength to face them. The transformation wasn't just external, it had reshaped my heart, my mind, and my soul. And I knew, with a certainty I had never felt before, that I was truly alive. Life after that workshop felt different. Not dramatically, not overnight, but in ways that were subtle, profound, and undeniably real. Every interaction, every glance, every conversation carried a new weight, a new richness. People approached me differently, yes, but more importantly, I approached myself differently. I moved through the world with a quiet confidence I had never known, a joy that wasn't dependent on validation but rather on the knowledge that I was finally being true to myself. And yet, there were moments that reminded me this journey wasn't just about celebration. One evening, I received a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, an old friend from college who had always teased me, questioned my choices, and doubted my courage. Their words were sharp at first, tinged with disbelief. "Is this really you? I don't even recognize you." For a moment, I froze. Old insecurities bubbled up, threatening to undo everything I had built. But then I realized something critical. Their perception didn't define me. I was no longer living for approval, no longer hiding behind layers of fear. I took a deep breath and replied, calmly but firmly, "Yes, it's me. And I'm happier, more confident, and more alive than I've ever been." There was silence at first. Then, slowly, the tone shifted. What began as skepticism became curiosity, and eventually, a hesitant admiration. That exchange reminded me of the ripple effect my transformation had on the world around me, not just in my office, but in the hearts of everyone willing to witness it. Work continued to challenge me in ways I never imagined. Leading projects, mentoring colleagues, and navigating the dynamics of a bustling office had always been demanding, but now, every challenge carried a new thrill. I discovered strength in patience, power in empathy, and courage in vulnerability. And in moments of doubt, I reminded myself of how far I had come, from trembling in front of a mirror, experimenting alone, to confidently standing in front of colleagues and clients, sharing my story, and inspiring others. One afternoon, my boss approached me again, his eyes glinting with that familiar mix of pride and mischief. "You know," he said, leaning casually against the doorway, "I wasn't sure how this would all unfold. But you've surpassed every expectation. The department is thriving, the clients are impressed, and you've changed the culture here. And it's beautiful to watch." I smiled, a quiet, fulfilled smile, feeling the warmth of validation, but also the deeper satisfaction of knowing that I had done this for myself, not for anyone else. "Thank you," I said softly. "But it's not just me. Everyone here has been part of this journey, in one way or another." He nodded, understanding more than I expected. "Perhaps. But you sparked it. You dared to step forward when most would have stayed hidden. And that courage, that's contagious." That evening, as I walked home, the city alive with lights and sounds, I reflected on the months that had passed. The transformation had started as a challenge, an opportunity presented by my boss, but it had become so much more. It was a journey of self-discovery, of acceptance, of courage, and of profound growth. Every outfit I wore, every gesture I made, every word I spoke had helped me understand myself in ways I never thought possible. At home, I paused before the mirror, looking at the reflection that had once been foreign and intimidating. Now, it felt familiar, comforting, even empowering. I touched the soft fabric of my blouse, adjusted my hair, and smiled. The person staring back wasn't just a disguise or a performance, they were me. Every step I had taken, every moment of fear I had faced, every choice I had made had led me to this place, wholly, unapologetically, alive. Weeks turned into months, and life settled into a new rhythm. I had become a mentor, a confidant, a leader. My colleagues sought my advice not just on work matters, but on personal challenges, inspired by my journey. And I realized something profound: the courage to embrace yourself authentically doesn't just change you, it changes the people around you. Then came the most personal moment of all. My family, who had always seen me as quiet, reserved, and cautious, finally noticed the shift. One weekend, my sister visited. She paused at the doorway, taking in my appearance, my demeanor, the confidence in my eyes. "You look incredible," she said softly. "But more than that, you seem happy. Truly happy." I laughed, a mixture of relief and joy. I've finally embraced who I am, in ways I never thought I could. Her smile was warm, accepting, and unwavering. She reached out, touched my hand, and said, "I'm proud of you. All of you." That moment, more than any praise from colleagues or recognition from my boss, struck me deeply. Acceptance from those I loved, for all of who I was, validated everything I had worked toward, everything I had feared, and everything I had dared to become. And then there was the day I realized something else. This journey was far from over. Every day offered a new lesson, a new challenge, and a new opportunity to grow. But now, I approached each day with a confidence that had once seemed impossible, a joy that radiated from the core of who I had become. I had faced my fears, embraced my identity, and discovered a courage that would guide me through every obstacle, every triumph, and every unexpected twist in life. As I stood on the balcony of my apartment that night, looking out at the sprawling city, I whispered to myself, almost reverently, "This is me. Fully me. Alive, courageous, and unapologetically myself." The journey had begun as a challenge from my boss, a test, an opportunity, a seemingly impossible scenario, but it had become a story of transformation that touched every part of my life. Every hesitation, every anxious glance in the mirror, every late-night rehearsal in my apartment had been worth it. I had learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's stepping forward despite it. Authenticity isn't always easy, but it's the most liberating, empowering experience imaginable. Months later, as I prepared for another day at the office, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My reflection smiled back, confident and poised, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to hide. I had stepped fully into my own identity, and the world had welcomed me with open arms. And in that moment, I realized the most profound truth of all. Transformation isn't just about changing how others see you, it's about discovering, embracing, and celebrating the person you have always been. Every step in these shoes, every choice, every challenge, had led me to a life of courage, authenticity, and joy. And I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that I would never look back. Because this was more than a role, more than a job, more than an experiment. This was me alive, whole, and radiant. And I had finally found the courage to step into the life I was always meant to live. From that day on, I carried myself differently. Not because I needed validation, not because I wanted approval, but because I finally understood what it meant to be fully, unapologetically me. Every day, I walked into the office with confidence. Every day, I inspired others to embrace their own truths. And every night, I reflected with gratitude, marveling at the extraordinary journey that had begun with a simple, unexpected opportunity. The day my boss said, "We need a female employee, and I think you're the perfect fit." Looking back, it seems almost impossible that one conversation could change so much. But it did. It changed my identity, my courage, my relationships, my life. And the greatest gift of all, it showed me that when you step into who you truly are, you don't just transform yourself, you illuminate a path for others to follow. And as I close this chapter, I know this isn't the end. Life will continue to challenge me, push me, and inspire me. But now, I face it with the knowledge that authenticity is my greatest strength, courage my most faithful companion, and the journey, this incredible, transformative journey, is far from over. Because every step I take, in these shoes and in this life, reminds me, I am alive. Fully alive. And I have never been more, me.